is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The DRC President Felix Tshisekedi visits Kenya and holds bilateral talks with his host, Uhuru Kenyatta. We have an update on the push to have national dialogue following weeks of violent protests in Zimbabwe. And leaders appeal to donors to honor their pledge to fund the fight against militants in the Sahel region. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program. In your business news, whistleblower who testified in South Africa's massive graft probe has been arrested. And Saudi Arabia plans to spend $3.8 billion to enhance mineral exploration. We begin here in Nairobi, where President Uhuru Kenyatta has hosted the leader of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi. During their talks, the two leaders explored ways and means of strengthening bilateral relations between the two countries. Trade, infrastructure, sharing, skills in extractive industry were some of the issues on the agenda. Tshisekedi says his country is willing to join the East African community to deepen its economic ties with the region. President Kenyatta has assured his counterpart of Kenya's commitment in helping the DRC achieve political stability. Kenya has for decades hosted Congolese refugees. Kenya will partner with the DR Congo in capacity building by offering training opportunities to Congolese public servants in the country. The DRC president is on his three-state maiden tour. After also visiting Angola, he is now heading to the Republic of Congo. Well, for more on President Tshisekedi's first foreign visits, I'm joined in studio by Matthias Muindi. He's an independent political risk analyst based here in Nairobi and specializing on the Horn of Africa and Great Lakes regions. Matthias, thank you for joining us on Africa Live. First off, the president of the DR Congo has been in Kenya. It is one of his first official visits since his inauguration. What do you make of the visit so soon after he was sworn in?
Well, thank you for having me. When you look at the choice of the places he has visited, by coming to Kenya, it is not surprising because Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta was the only African leader who was in Kinshasa when Tshisekedi was being sworn on 24th of January. So Tshisekedi wants to build on that political relationship which he established with Kenyatta. The second thing, reason why Tshisekedi could have focused on coming to Kenya is also concerns about security in his own country, especially in the eastern region. Eastern Congo has been in turmoil for the last 20 or so years, and some of that instability has been linked to some of its neighboring countries from the east, principally Uganda and Rwanda. Those two countries have not been all that warm towards Tshisekedi. So by going to Nairobi, which is like the regional political player and diplomatic player in the region, right, Tshisekedi wants to maybe start working on security issues in Eastern DRC by reaching out to Kenya and possibly use that relationship to see how he can work a working relationship with Rwanda and Uganda. The third reason why Tshisekedi could be coming to Kenya is that Kenya is the international trade gateway into Eastern DRC. Most of the trade which goes on in Eastern DRC, if you look at all the exports and some of the imports, they come through ports in Kenya.
So let's just build on the issue of security, because you did mention that security could be a priority for him, particularly in Eastern DRC. But he is also going to be, he has been to Angola, he will also be going to the Republic of Congo. So exactly what is his point towards his foreign policy manifesto going forward?
Angola and the Republic of Congo, which is also known as Congo-Brazzaville, they are also very important players in regional stability, especially in the Great Lakes. We have the International Conference of Great Lakes region. It's a regional body whose headquarters are in Angola. So it will be very important for Tshisekedi to go to Angola and to establish that relationship with the president of Angola. Secondly, the current leader or the current chairperson of that body is the president of Congo-Brazzaville. So it's important to get those two leaders on board because they will be instrumental in trying to craft the policy, the strategy is going to adopt in trying to deal with the situation in the Eastern DRC, especially considering that Rwanda and Uganda they are still kind of cool towards Kinshasa.
When you look at the election, though, there was a little bit of tension, or quite a bit of tension in the DRC in the run-up to the election and during the election period itself. All that seems to have dissipated now. Can we say that the DRC is ready for economic takeoff given its vast natural resources?
Absolutely, the country is now ready for takeoff. The political tension which we saw a few weeks ago after the election, the initial election results were announced, has dissipated, and that has mainly been because of the declining international and domestic support to the losing presidential candidate, Martin Fayulu. So Fayulu is not in a position at the moment to continue with his campaign of opposing Tshisekedi. So Tshisekedi can effectively say, look, the elections are behind us. It's time now to work on delivering the election promises we made the Congolese. So let's say Congo is open for business.
All right, Matthias Wendy, we'll leave it there for the moment. Thank you very much for your insights on the DRC. Well, let's now go to Zimbabwe, where the latest development from the country shows that the country's main opposition has snubbed the talks with President Emerson Mnangagwa. It says any dialogue with the president would have to be brokered by an independent outside mediator. The Movement for Democratic Change said it would take part in the talks only if they were held under the supervision of the United Nations, the African Union, or the Southern African Development Community, SADC.
Zimbabwe's President Emerson Mnangagwa sent out an invitation to more than 20 candidates who ran against him in July 2018 elections for a meeting at State House on Wednesday afternoon. The Zimbabwean leader has been under pressure at home and abroad following a brutal crackdown on anti-government protests last month. He cut short an international trip amidst the violence, and his government has promised to investigate allegations of abuse and misconduct by the country's security forces. The initiation of a dialogue is also seen as a response to a mounting economic crisis that has stoked fears of more unrest. Currently, teachers are engaged in a nationwide strike, while salary negotiations between civil servants and government are deadlocked. At least two of the invited politicians have confirmed they will attend Wednesday's meeting. It's not yet clear if main opposition leader Nelson Chamisa, who's been leading the calls for dialogue, will participate. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Well, that is the latest development from Zimbabwe, where the country's main opposition has now snubbed the talks with President Emerson Mnangagwa. It says any dialogue with the president would have to be brokered by an independent outside mediator. The Movement for Democratic Change said it would take part in the talks only if they were held under the supervision of the United Nations, the African Union, or the Southern African Development Community, SADC. Now, ahead of Nigeria's presidential elections set for February the 16th, thousands of women from across the country are insisting on the need to have a violent-free election. The West African nation has a history of election violence, which has claimed lives and destroyed properties. Philly has a report from the nation's capital, Abuja.
They unite to make their message loud and clear. This is a coalition of women groups working with the United Nations, coming together to call for a peaceful election next week.
I came out here because I'm Nigerian and I'm a woman, so I must join women to say no to violence and support peace.
The large turnout of women for this peace march ahead of Nigeria's election clearly indicates an increase in women's interest and participation in Nigeria's politics. They are calling on the government and all stakeholders to ensure adequate safety and peaceful conduct ahead of the elections.
Nigeria women.
Previous elections, like in 2011, where post-election violence left over 4,000 persons displaced and several houses destroyed, have discouraged some women from exercising their civic rights. Over 2,500 women in Abuja and thousands more across other states in the country are now looking to change that. The organizers believe women bear the brunt of election violence.
When there's violence now, we will be affected as women. Our children will be used as dogs. And these are the things that we don't want to see. We are saying that election is not, war. Election is something that comes every 4 years in Nigeria. And so 4 years is not enough for us to kill ourselves. We are saying that we need peace.
President Muhammadu Buhari, who is running for a second term against challenger and former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, has reiterated his commitments to ensuring a peaceful and credible election. But the opposition doubts that. The Independent National Electoral Commission says security personnel are prepared if violence does indeed erupt again.
The Commission is committed to ensuring a free, fair, transparent, and above all, peaceful elections. And from the commitment of the security agencies, because that is their own portion anyway, to provide security during elections. All of them, each time they come to a meeting, they give the assurance that they have put in place greater strategies to provide a peaceful poll.
As for these women demanding a peaceful vote, many are confident this election will be much safer.
Personally, I've never come out to vote in time past because of the problems during voting. But with this awareness now, I think this election is going to be peaceful, and I'm going to come out to vote.
Time has gone when they thought that women didn't have a say. Women should be seen and not heard. Our voices cannot be subdued.
And these women have good reason to get to the polls. Nigeria is facing high levels of insecurity, corruption and poverty, and they want to help elect leaders that will tackle the issues plaguing the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Meanwhile, the United Nations Development Programme is training over 250 journalists from across the north of Nigeria on election reporting. Nigeria goes to the polls on the 16th of February to elect a new president. To reduce the spread of fake news and hate speech in the build-up to the polls, UNDP is shifting its attention to the media. CGTN Samson Omale reports from Jos.
Fairness, accuracy, truthfulness, transparency and independence. These are the qualities the United Nations Development Programme is hoping to strengthen as it engages with media executives and election reporters.
We don't want media reports of the election to set the country on fire. This election will probably be the most hotly contested since we transited into democracy.
This workshop aims to equip editors and reporters with conflict-sensitive journalistic skills for election coverage. It is also an opportunity for reporters to recount their encounters with politicians in the safe space. Participants agreed that media could exacerbate or contribute to reducing the risk of election violence in northern Nigeria.
The United Nations Development Programme and the Independent National Electoral Commission have identified journalists in northern Nigeria as key partners in ensuring a violent-free election, hence this series of trainings.
This training is intended to make journalists aware of their responsibilities.
So we're doing this training to help journalists understand the influence they are going to wield in the election and how to help people make informed choices.
Many of the trainees say they now feel better equipped ahead of the polls.
In election, there is a need for you to report it in such a way that both parties at the end of the day will have their voices heard. And then my report will not instigate conflict.
Even though I want to be the first to break the news, I have to be very sensitive in choosing my words.
Some journalists allow the sentiments to overshadow their professionalism. Of course, journalists have a role to play in making the democratic system of Nigeria to work more stronger.
The UNDP and Nigeria's electoral body will replicate this training across Nigeria before this month's election. Samson Omale, CGTN, Jos, Nigeria.
In Malawi, former President Joyce Banda has formally submitted papers to run as a candidate in upcoming elections. She reversed her decision to join an alliance with Vice President Saulos Chilima. Surrounded by her People's Party supporters, she touted her past record and underlined her support for Malawian women. Last week, Chilima and Banda announced they had formed a four-party coalition in a bid to unseat President Peter Mutharika in the May 21st vote, but the group soon broke up. Banda first came to power as vice president and succeeded then-President Bingu wa Mutharika. Bingu died suddenly in April of 2012, and Banda lost the 2014 election to Peter Mutharika and left the country after being embroiled in a multi-million-dollar corruption scandal. You're watching Africa Live. We'll take a short break now, but still ahead. Leaders appeal to donors to honor their pledge to fund the fight against militants in the Sahel region. And we continue our special series on Kenya's Turkana region with a look at the challenges of fishing in the world's largest desert lake.
My home country lies at the foot of Africa, the southernmost tip of our beautiful continent, and the unique point at which two great oceans meet. Now on a clear day in Cape Town, you can just make out Robben Island, the place where Nelson Mandela was jailed for so long. South Africa has changed so much in the years since then, but it is this country's history that shaped me and took me into reporting. I'm inspired by Africa's men and women of courage. It's the everyday hero who brings out my passion. The creatives, the decision makers, the risk takers who are shaping a bright African future. I see them in Cape Town. I see them in the pulsating city of Johannesburg. I see them across the continent, and I know our time has come.
CGTN is a platform where African voices can speak for themselves and take their stories to the world. My name is Lindy Mtongana, and I'm a news anchor and reporter for CGTN. For decades, scientists working here have unearthed the remains of ancient man buried deep underground. But that's not all there is to Kenya's Turkana County. From February 5th, join CGTN's Wilkisa Nyabwa for our 6-episode series as she explores the cradle of mankind. Africa Live. Find your voice.
To Burkina Faso now, where the Sahel G5 leaders have concluded a one-day meeting in the capital, Ouagadougou. The leaders drawn from Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania and Niger are calling on international donors to honor their pledge to fund anti-jihadist military operations. CGTN's Wilkisa Nyabwa has more.
The G5 force launched its campaign on October 2018 amid growing unrest in the desert-rich areas of the Sahel. Jihadist attacks have spread from Mali and Niger into Burkina Faso in recent months, killing soldiers and civilians. The constant attacks led to an introduction of a joint task force made up of troops from Mali, Niger, Chad, Burkina Faso and Mauritania.
Tous les pays qui doivent contribuer en bataillon l'ont fait.
All the countries that must contribute troops have done so at different levels, with the read be in the eastern strand, the center, and the west. And that's why I have said the joint force is indeed operational at all levels. We must congratulate the countries for their exceptional efforts in achieving this, especially when we know the promises made in Brussels were not all kept. It has been the internal efforts of our countries that we have enabled this joint force to become operational.
Les efforts internes au pays qui ont permis surtout de rendre opérationnel.
The latest attack near the Malian border left 4 Burkina Faso soldiers dead and 5 others injured. The G5 Sahel group seeks to prioritize economic and social development projects while continuing with the current military interventions.
We will continue the reinforcement and acceleration of the joint operation force. Secondly, we will ensure that the economic and social projects are put in place and made accessible to all the people of the Sahel region. Thirdly, we must work with the youth and women in the different regions of the Sahel through projects that will allow them to live decently and not to be recruited by the terrorists.
Lack of funding and training as well as poor equipment have greatly undermined the Sahel G5 initiatives. That's why the regional leaders feel it's critical for donors to honor their pledge to fund the fight against militants. Wilkisa Nyabwa, CGTN.
Well, let's return to Nigeria, where the Borno, Adamawa and Yobe states have been affected by a decade-long humanitarian crisis. This has spilled over into the Lake Chad region, where those affected are crossing the border to seek refuge and assistance. Armed extremists, notably Boko Haram militants, are said to be behind this exodus.
60,000 people have been displaced from Nigeria's northeast in the last 3 months. This is according to the International Organization for Migration. An upsurge in violence has seen thousands flee their homes in search of safety.
Since November, we've seen 59,200. Since in the last 2 years, we have not seen that many people on the move. And it's been what we've seen in the last few months, especially the last 2 months of the year, is an increased sophistication of the non-state armed groups, an increased number of attacks, and success in taking towns.
More than 27,000 people have been killed since the beginning of the crisis. Aid organizations have also not been spared. More than 3 agencies have been ambushed during attacks on their compounds. Humanitarian access is limited amid ongoing insecurity. Aid agencies are not in a position to comprehensively assess the needs of those affected. The ongoing crisis has also pushed tens of thousands of civilians into already overcrowded camps. Some of the people who moved across to Cameroon were returned. According to the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the number of people who stand in need of humanitarian assistance in Nigeria now stands at 7.7 million. Dina Matengo, CGTN.
And in New York, the first ever Security Council debate on crime in open waters has taken place. The UN's anti-drugs and crime chief warns of the threat to nations and people across oceans from Africa to Asia. UN correspondent Liling Tan reports.
With most of the high seas beyond the oversight of countries, criminal groups are exploiting the lack of territorial jurisdiction and freedom of navigation in increasingly sophisticated ways, warned the UN's top official on drugs and crime. On Tuesday, Yuri Fedotov told the UN's most powerful arm that maritime crime involves vessels, cargoes, crews and illicit money flows with links to piracy, illegal trafficking and terrorism.
These crimes pose an immediate danger to people's lives and safety. They undermine human rights, hinder sustainable development, and, as this Council has recognized, they threaten international peace and security.
The first open debate on the topic of transnational maritime crime was convened by Equatorial Guinea, which presides over the Security Council this month.
The only way to guarantee maritime security is by working together, because if we do that, we can take advantage of the immense benefits that the sea provides.
The subject is of key importance to Equatorial Guinea, which is one of 13 countries in the Gulf of Guinea that covers some 6,000 kilometers of coastline, and where piracy is said to have accounted for 30% of attacks in African waters in the last decade. But the region is also victim to maritime terrorism, theft of natural resources, environmental damage, and the trafficking of weapons, drugs, and people. And the Security Council heard this session that these all threaten the lives and economy of the continent. Now, the UN Office on Drugs and Crime has a counter-piracy program that it says grew out of its success off the coast of Somalia. UNODC also deals with maritime crime in the Mediterranean Sea and the Gulf of Aden, the Sulu and Celebes Seas around the Philippines, and the Atlantic, Indian, and Pacific Oceans. But it says it is hard to combat because the jurisdiction is complex and such crimes are often unseen. Liling Tan, CGTN, New York.
And now to our continuing special series of the Turkana region in Kenya. Fishing is a skill that has been handed down through generations of members of Kenya's Turkana community who live around Lake Turkana. In recent years, however, several challenges have emerged, eating into the fishermen's livelihood. Here's Here's CGTN's Wilkis with the second part of the gripping tales, Treasures of Turkana.
The sun is peeping over the horizon when the fishermen set out. Early mornings are the best times for fishing expeditions. The Lake Turkana is peaceful then, and the nets the fishermen cast the previous evening are heavy with fish. But not all the fishermen who fish in this lake are so lucky. On one side of the Lake Turkana in Kalokol, fishermen take stock of the morning's catch. Without boats, they can only fish where the water is shallow. A whole morning's work has yielded only these little fish.
Tukipata kama hii tunatoa 2, 5 watu wanakula.
I'll give the children some to eat and sell the rest. They won't fetch more than $1.50.
Mta shilingi 5, shilingi 10 hivyo.
But on the other side of the lake, a 7-hour journey by boat, the fishermen encounter different fortunes. They guide motorboats laden with fish back to the store at the shore. For a small fee, the Fishermen Cooperative Society of Loyangalani provides freezers to store the fresh fish and stores to keep the dried ones. It also helps to find buyers. Fishing is a skill that has been handed down through generations among the Turkana people.
Kama hii bahari ndio shamba yetu kama wa Turkana ambaye tunaitegemea. Hakuna shamba ambaye tunategemea hapa, ni bahari ndio tunategemea kama shamba zetu.
But in recent years, even for fishermen with boats, it has become harder to make a decent living from fishing in Lake Turkana. One of the challenges that fishermen in Lake Turkana continue to face is stormy weather when they must remain on shore for their own safety. But on days like this, when the lake is relatively calm, then they can venture out to earn their living.
Formerly, they were using sailing boats. Now they have, most of them have motorized boats. So it was a challenge because they don't get their fish on time here because of this wind again.
Fishermen without boats are also often at risk of being attacked by crocodiles or the Ethiopians who often cross over to the Kenyan side. And once they secure their catch, the fishermen must find a market. The fresh fish is more popular than the sun-dried variety.
This piece of fish, they get them very low, maybe 20 shillings or less. But when we buy them fresh, when we start fresh, one piece gets 100 shillings. So it's like a 100% profit to them. So we encourage them later on to bring all fish fresh.
Some of this fish will make it to the capital, Nairobi, where it will be sold at a much higher price. The profits won't trickle down to the hundreds of fishermen who venture out to the lake every day, but they are hopeful. The county government of Turkana has pledged to donate fishing boats. There are also plans to partner with other organizations to export fresh fish to other countries. It is such incentives that keep the fishermen of Turkana on the lake day after day, hoping to reap big. Bulletin, CGTN, Turkana, Kenya.
Now, crafting sustainable environment management and waste disposal systems has been a big challenge in Zimbabwe. President Emmerson Mnangagwa has now initiated a national cleanup campaign under the theme, My Environment, My Pride. It's being hoped that this will rally people all over the country to participate in cleaning and clearing residential and business areas.
For years, Zimbabwe has not been able to establish sustainable water, sanitation and waste disposal systems. This is why President Emmerson Mnangagwa's new environmental cleanup campaign could prove to be a critical intervention.
It's a culture we must adopt. It's a culture we must give to our children, to the next generation. As I've said, cleanliness makes us united, makes us love each other. You cannot, when you are very smart, clean in the body and the mind, think badly against your neighbor.
The deplorable state of the environment is having a direct impact on the health sector and has been linked to the recurring outbreaks of cholera and typhoid. The president declared the first Friday of every month as the National Cleanup Day. The call is for every individual to develop a culture of cleanliness and to take 2 hours out of the morning from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. to schedule a cleanup of their environs, be it residential, community or business centers. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, let's now go to Penina Karibe for the latest business news. Penina. Thank you, Beatrice. And coming up in business news tonight, whistleblower who testified in South Africa's massive graft probe has been arrested. And Saudi Arabia plans to spend $3.8 billion to enhance mineral exploration.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
South African police have arrested 5 people, including a witness at a judicial inquiry into alleged influence peddling. One of them is Angelo Agrizi, a former COO at services company Busasa. He testified about how the firm bribed South African politicians and bureaucrats for years to secure government contracts for his company. The 5 suspects are charged with misappropriating about $44.5 million, I should say. The arrests are linked to contracts awarded by the Correctional Services Department to Busasa, now known as African Global Operations. Zambia has received bids from Canada's First Quantum Minerals and others for a 17% stake in its state mining investment arm, Zambia Consolidated Copper Mines Investment Holdings. This comes after the government fired the arm's chief executive, Pius Kasolo, for allegedly refusing to sanction the sale. The state mining investment arm is listed on the London Stock Exchange, Lusaka Stock Exchange, and on an unregulated French market. Africa's second largest copper producer increased its sliding scale for royalties of 4 to 6% by 1.5 percentage points from January. The country also introduced a new 10% tax when the price of copper exceeds $7,500 per ton. Rwanda has signed a $400 million deal to produce bottled gas from Lake Kivu. The lake, which lies on the border between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda, discharges dense clouds of methane that scientists fear might erupt, killing those living along its shore. The project by Gasmet Energy would suck gas from the lake's deep floor and bottle it for use as fuel, as well as to help prevent toxic gas from bubbling to the surface. It's also hoped that the bottled methane will also cut local reliance on wood and charcoal. The bottled gas is expected to go on sale within 2 years. Saudi Arabia has announced it will invest around $3.8 billion to enhance access to geoscience data and reduce regulatory red tape. According to Saudi authorities, the funds will be spent on making it easier to do business and improving data quality. This will reduce the risks associated with investing in new mining opportunities for gold, zinc, rare earth metals and other minerals. The government plans to jumpstart the Saudi mining sector to form part of a broader industrial strategy aimed at diversifying the economy. The move also intends on attracting private sector investments worth $426 billion over the next decade. Investments will be made through the National Industrial Development and Logistics Program. Ethiopia has approved its membership to the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. It is one of the biggest trade deals since the creation of the World Trade Organization's attempts to create a single market in Africa. Ethiopia hopes the agreement will create a closer and full regional integration in the continent. CGTN Grimchala tells us more.
Ethiopia called its decision to endorse the Continental Free Trade Area Agreement historic. But for Ethiopia, it's also about making a decision that could open more doors for its economy and fellow African states, and in the process, achieve common rapid economic growth.
We want to create a strong, closer regional economic integration throughout Africa. As a leader in Africa, Ethiopia has to play its role in this regard. But number two, before we advance the negotiation, we have done considerable study assessing the impact of CFTA on Ethiopian economy. And the impact is quite positive.
Currently, Ethiopia's export to the rest of Africa stands at 18%, while its import from the continent is a little over 4%. By joining the Continental Free Trade Agreement, Ethiopia wants to boost its exports, especially from its manufacturing industries, while opening its doors to goods from across Africa.
As you know, Ethiopia's export performance is hindered because of poor trade logistics. But now, because of this closer regional integration, we'll be able to export to the rest of Africa. So in that sense, it has dramatic impact on Ethiopia's economic growth.
The CFTA will bring together 55 African countries with a combined population of more than 1 billion people and a combined gross domestic product of more than $3.4 trillion. However, this plan of creating a single market for goods and service with a free movement of people and investment could also have its negative impacts on economies. Ethiopia says it's ready to tackle challenge related with revenue collection.
In terms of custom collection, the revenue impact could be one issue, but we also looked at that. We are conducting the negotiation in a manner that reduces Ethiopia's vulnerability toward this revenue reduction. And because of that, we have excluded from liberalization products that we consider to be sensitive.
In total, 44 out of the 55 AU member states signed the consolidated text of the CFTA agreement. 47 signed the Kigali Declaration and 30 signed the Protocol on Free Movement. Later, 5 more countries inked the CFTA agreement during the summit in Mauritania last year. South Africa, Sierra Leone, Lesotho, Burundi and Namibia, bringing the total number of signatories to 49. 22 ratifications are now required for the agreement to enter into force. The African Union hopes to achieve that number this year. Gurumtara, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Tunisia's National Chamber of Women Entrepreneurs has launched an initiative to encourage businesswomen to produce and export products to foreign markets. The initiative is in collaboration with the Ministry of Industry and Small and Medium-Sized Enterprises. CGTN's Adnan Shawashi has more.
The president of the National Chamber of Women Entrepreneurs, CNCFE, says that about 60% of tertiary graduates in Tunisia are women. They account for 40% of unemployed higher education graduates, while startups can provide them huge job opportunities.
The Chamber is working to bring together all stakeholders to examine incentives offered to startups with the aim of improving the survival rate and avoid the mortality of these enterprises 3 years after their creation.
On his part, the Secretary of State in charge of small and medium-sized enterprises said that the law on startups that came to force in 2018 is a component of the National Startup Strategy, which aims to empower women entrepreneurs.
The strategy also aims to make Tunisia a preferred destination for investors in technology, encouraging women to start their own businesses and to create their own enterprises will create a new dynamic in the entrepreneurial space.
Officials emphasize that the number of women in executive roles is still very low despite the existence of 19,000 women entrepreneurs in Tunisia.
Women in positions of responsibility at ministries, state agencies, the private sector, as well as in startups are very active and creative. Tunisia aims to double the number of women leaders in the next few years and to encourage business women to export abroad.
According to the CNFCE, some 58% of startups are exporting units, 20% of products to Europe, 21% to Africa, 7.5% to Middle East, and 5% to North America. The National Chamber of Women Entrepreneurs was created in 1990. It is part of the Union of Industry and Handicrafts. The organization provides technical assistance to startups and helps them access funding from various financial partners. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
German car maker Daimler saw its fourth quarter operating profit fall 22% as trade wars and ballooning costs for developing electric and self-driving cars hit profits at Mercedes-Benz cars. According to the corporation, the return on sales at Mercedes-Benz cars fell to 7.3% in the fourth quarter from 9.5% in the year earlier period. As a result, earnings before interest and tax dropped to $3 billion in the fourth quarter, below analysts' expectations. The CEO says despite knocks from 2019's headwinds, the company was doing well and on course for their future projects. For 2019, Mercedes-Benz cars expect to achieve a return on sales of between 6% and 8% and a return on sales of between 5% and 7% for Mercedes-Benz.
2018 was a year where Daimler experienced a strong headwind, from the ongoing diesel debate to the changeover to the new WLTP test message to the global trade dispute. All of this was reflected in our financial results and our share price. Nonetheless, we held our own against this headwind and made substantial progress in key areas for the future. We managed this, not least because of our strong core business.
Let's leave it there for now, but still to come on global business, there appears to be no end in sight for Zimbabwe's teachers' strike. We'll be live in Harare for details of that story. That's at the top of the hour. I'll see you then. Beatrice, back to you.
Penina, thank you. And we still have more news for you here on the program. Here's what's ahead. We tell you why many Nigerians are eager to learn the Chinese language and the culture.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's now take you to Nigeria, where the Confucius Institute was established at the University of Lagos some 10 years ago. And it is proving to be an inspiration to Nigerian students wishing to learn the Chinese language. The interesting thing about this institution is that Nigerian graduates are the ones currently teaching their countrymen about Chinese culture and language. Take a look.
Dr. Adeto Rubanwo is one of the success stories of the Confucius Institute here at the University of Lagos. He started out by learning the Chinese language here. Today, he teaches Chinese at the Institute and at the Department of Linguistics, African and Asian Studies in the university.
Teaching Chinese is quite an honor to Nigerian students because it places them a great spot in the new age of globalization. So for them to learn a new language, it gives them a lot of communication skills and a lot of good job prospects in the future.
From just a handful of students who showed interest in learning the Chinese language when the institute was set up at the university about 10 years ago, hundreds now throng the small facility, eager to learn the language. And apart from housing the Confucius Institute, the University of Lagos itself now runs a department that offers Bachelors of Arts degree in Chinese language.
For every 3 months, we have 300 to 500 students. Now, for example, since this January, in 3 weeks, we have got 60 students, starters for language learning, newcomers at all. And our students will stay here. At most for 2 years, they can get the scholarship. Many fast learners, 1 year.
Oluwafisayo Oshodi, whose Chinese name is Luan, is one of the several beneficiaries of the scholarships offered by the institute. She's currently studying for a master's degree in biomedical engineering at the Beijing Institute of Technology in Beijing, China.
It's all started from 2014 when I participated in a Chinese bridge competition, Hanyu. And before that, I got a scholarship here using my Chinese exam certificate, HSK4, which I got 1 year scholarship. Then from the competition as well, I got another year scholarship, but different year. The first scholarship was 2015/2016. The second scholarship was 2017/2018.
So many students, they want to study, and we do need teachers, we do need classrooms. And the challenge is we don't have enough teachers, and we just have more and more students and schools and institutions that asking for sending teachers to their schools. We're also focusing on helping our students to become the future teachers so that they can help their people or your people, their brothers, their sisters, their children to study Chinese.
It's that plan that produced teachers like Adetoro and the few Nigerians who now teach Chinese language and culture at the Institute. Despite the challenge of inadequate teaching personnel, the Institute is embarking on an audacious plan to take the teaching of the Chinese language to one of the biggest import markets in Lagos, the Alaba International Market.
We discovered that many people there, working there, they are dealing with Chinese business people. So we want to set up a teaching site in that market so that the business people, they don't have to come to Unilag. They can study Chinese in their own markets. Our teachers can go twice a week if they like. So every time 3 or 4 hours, they can study Chinese there.
With a growing number of Chinese coming to Nigeria for business and work, the Institute has been holding special Chinese language sessions for officials of the Nigerian Immigration Service to facilitate their interaction with visiting Chinese at the country's airports. And beyond teaching the Chinese language in an academic setting like this, the Institute also organizes cultural activities as a means of teaching its students Chinese culture as well.
The two nations are coming closer and closer. We are learning each other so well, so that with the language learning, with the cultural communications, the two nations are becoming better brothers and sisters now.
DJ Badmo, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
The city of Joburg on Tuesday hosted a memorial celebration for the late Oliver Mtukudzi at the Joburg Theatre in Braamfontein. The renowned jazz musician died after a reported lengthy battle with diabetes. He was laid to rest in Zimbabwe on January the 28th. CGTN's Yolisan Jamela has more.
Mtukudzi was loved in many parts of the world and he had a significant following here in South Africa. He did a number of collaborations with many South African artists, including Ringo and Ladysmith Black Mambazo. In his musical career, Oliver Mtukudzi Odugu, as he was affectionately known, fused the Zimbabwean music style Chiti, the traditional drumming patterns of his clan, the Katekwe. South African Baqanga, the marimba and Afro-pop styles. Friends, family and fans gathered at the Joburg Theatre to celebrate the veteran jazz musician. Mtukudzi's death sent shockwaves through the music community across the globe.
We prayed that he would get better, and we prayed that we would still be able to be with him and do what he loved most, which is to make people happy through his music and to teach people through his music and to celebrate life with people through his music.
We have lost a great musician who graced our festivals with amazing performances that kept our audiences dancing. You know, we keep losing legends and deprived of the best entertainment, which also makes our economy thin. Oliver contributed to the economy of this country. I know because wherever he went, there will be thousands of people paying quite a lot of money to come and see him.
He represented courage, hope, passion. He triumphed. And in a certain kind of way, it was all really beautiful. To me, that's what humanity is about. That's what Oliver was about.
We, the people of Zimbabwe, are proud to claim primary kinship with the late Dr. Oliver Mtukudzi, who, through his renowned musical talents, became not just a global citizen, but a legendary international icon. His guitar may not twang anymore to his distinctive touch, but his legacy endures beyond the many albums he left for our continued enjoyment.
The memorial celebration was directed by Mtukudzi's fellow traveler, a musician and friend, Steve Dyer. He told the audience that Tuku was actually a very humorous person.
He would say, please, can you pick me up at the airport? And I'd say, okay, but I have a problem. And he'd say, what? I say, how will I know who you are? Should I bring a placard there that says Oliver Mtukudzi? He says, no, you can't miss me. And I said, how so? He says, well, I'm tall, dark, and handsome.
Mtukudzi released his 67th album 10 months before he passed on. Yudison Jamela for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
And your sports news coming up next. Here's what's